Hi, my name is Vivian. I'm glad you're listening to my story. In the Blake family, dinner wasn't for bondage, it was a battlefield dressed in linen and legacy. Tonight's venue, a wine estate outside Napa, glittering with chandeliers and cold ambition. I took my usual seat near the fireplace, unnoticed, while my cousins circled each other like predators in Prada. Closed on a ranch in Wyoming last week, Julian announced, swirling his Cabernet like it held generational wisdom. Harper didn't even look up from her phone. We just finalized the vineyard in Provence. Private helipad, no big deal. Their voices rose with each boast, layered like a game of one-upmanship no one ever truly wins. I sipped my tea, worn boots tucked under the tablecloth, while they laughed about renters people like me. Aunt Meredith finally turned to me with her signature cocktail of pity and condescension. "You've been awfully quiet, Vivian. Still renting that little place in Portland, dear?" I smiled. If only they knew. Before we start, take a moment. What time is it right now, and where are you tuning in from? Let me know in the comments. This story, it might feel strangely personal. They think I rent. Technically, they're not wrong. I do live in a unit on Willoughby Lane, a modest brick complex nestled under tall oaks and wrapped in ivy. What they don't know is that I also own it. The entire block, in fact, purchased quietly 5 years ago through Brightmoor Group, the investment firm I built from scratch. They think I sell apartments. What I actually do is negotiate 7-figure acquisitions over video calls in that same so-called tiny living room they mock. I've closed deals from a second-hand sofa with a cracked phone screen and a mug of chamomile beside me. Let them laugh. They've always needed someone to measure themselves against, and I've always made the perfect benchmark for their pity. What they've never realized is that invisibility has its perks. When you're underestimated, no one sees you coming. Brightmoor wasn't born in a boardroom. It came to life during late nights working admin jobs and studying zoning laws in a rented studio. I took what others overlooked, aging properties, neglected neighborhoods, and turned them into homes people could be proud of. Not with flash, with care. Now Brightmoor quietly owns over a dozen commercial properties across Oregon and Northern California. Our mission: ethical redevelopment. No evictions for profit, no luxury for show, just real places for real people. And the name on the deeds? Never mine. Always a shell, a trust, a holding arm. The Blake family made me learn early: power is only respected when it's loud. But I've learned something better: real power moves in silence. That estate we gathered in tonight, Blakewell Square, it used to be under Dad's name. 6 months ago, Brightmoor acquired controlling interest through a discreet private purchase. No one batted an eye. No one traced it back. But tomorrow morning, at 9 a.m., that changes. The board meeting set, financial records audited, contracts reviewed. Every corner they've cut, every fund they've siphoned, it's all about to surface. And when they finally ask who's behind the reform, they'll see me, but not the Vivian they remember. Julian leaned over his truffle risotto, wine glass raised like a gavel. "We were just wondering, Viv, what's your endgame? I mean, still renting at 35? Harper chimed in without looking up. "Didn't even know people our age still rented. Thought that was a college phase." I took a sip of tea to hide the smirk threatening my lips. They always delivered these little barbs like they were doing me a favor. Educating the poor cousin who somehow missed the family memo on upward mobility. "That little building on Willoughby, right?" Aunt Meredith added, swirling her lemon water. "Still there?" I nodded. "It's homey. I like it. Homey." That was one word for a fully restored 1920s complex with rent stabilization protections, solar upgrades, and a waiting list of over 300 applicants. What they saw as failure was, in fact, one of Brightmoor's first major holdings or launchpad into ethical portfolio expansion. "I suppose that's charming," Meredith mused, in the way one compliments a stray dog. "But really, sweetheart, it's time to grow up. Buy something real. Something real." As if the very table they sat at, carved from imported mahogany and polished with money funneled through maintenance budgets, wasn't technically mine. Blakewell Square had been sold 6 months ago through a silent auction. No names, just numbers. And my numbers were very persuasive. They thought I still walked dogs for side income. They didn't know I had final approval on their lease renewals. Dad cleared his throat and chuckled lightly. Now. Vivian chose her path. Not everyone's meant for boardrooms and vineyards. I raised an eyebrow. Not everyone, no. But I was. I just built mine differently. Let them talk. They'd see soon enough. Because tomorrow, a letter bearing my name would land on every desk in the Blakewell boardroom. And it would say, in no uncertain terms, change is here, and so is the person bringing it. By sunrise, the Blake family estate was quiet, but my world was already moving. At 6:15 a.m., I stood in the penthouse office of Brightmoor Group, the soft gray-blue of Portland's skyline stretching beyond my floor-to-ceiling windows. The Willoughby Lane apartment had served its purpose. This was home now. Naomi, my assistant, entered briskly with a cappuccino and a folder. "They're early," she said, setting the cup beside my laptop. "Julian and Harper showed up 45 minutes ago, already trying to charm the independents on the board." "Let them," I said calmly. "Charm doesn't hold up under audit." She opened the folder. "The packets are ready. Full breakdown on unauthorized expense reports, inflated contractor invoices, misuse of tenant funds. We even found the off-books shell account linked to the Blakewell Square renovations." I took the papers in hand, flipping through pages I'd already memorized. Every number had been cross-checked, every name verified, every loophole closed. Naomi hesitated. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? Once you're unmasked, there's no undoing it, no going back to the shadows." His 10. I looked up from the papers, my voice steady. "They've abused a legacy they didn't earn. It's time someone who values it reclaimed it." She nodded. "Then it's time." I stepped into the private dressing room just off the office. Gone were my jeans and worn cardigans. Today, I wore a navy Altuzarra suit, structured but fluid, strength woven into every seam, the kind of outfit Aunt Meredith once hoped I'd wear to impress a future husband. Instead, I'd wear it to dismantle their kingdom of smoke. At 8:58, I stepped into the elevator. The ride down was quiet, purposeful, my breath even. No nerves, no anger, only clarity. The boardroom awaited. So did the truth. And for the first time in years, I wasn't hiding. I was walking straight into the fire, with the matches in my hand. The boardroom fell into a hush the moment I stepped inside. 12 high-backed chairs circled the polished table. Leather portfolios sat unopened. Bottled water untouched. At the far end, Julian, Harper, Aunt Meredith, and my father looked up, expecting someone important. Someone else. Julian scowled. "This is a closed meeting. Who let her in?" I calmly set my briefcase at the head of the table. "I'm Vivian Blake," I said evenly. "Founder and sole owner of Brightmoor Group, the firm that acquired Blakewell Square 6 months ago." Silence. No gasps. Just air leaving the room in slow motion. Harper blinked rapidly. Meredith's pearls stiffened against her throat. Dad's pen froze mid-spin. "Don't be ridiculous," Julian snapped. "You? That's impossible." I opened my briefcase and began sliding audit packets across the table. "Each of you will find copies of every financial discrepancy tied to your names. Unauthorized transfers, inflated vendor contracts, personal expenses charged to operating budgets." Dad finally spoke. "Vivian, sweetheart, what is this?" "This," I said, not unkindly, "is accountability." Meredith's voice trembled. "You'd air this out publicly? Your own family?" "I'm not airing it out. I'm cleaning it up." I looked at each of them, one by one. "You mocked my life, dismissed my work, and misused a legacy you claimed to protect. I spent a decade preserving what you were too entitled to value." "But you live in Willoughby," Harper sputtered. "You show apartments in town." "I build homes," I corrected. "And I live where I choose. That building you sneer at? It's one of our most successful preservation projects, because real success doesn't need to scream, it just needs to last." Phones buzzed around the table. Naomi's timing was perfect. One board member looked up from his screen. Brightmore just released a public statement. Vivian Blake confirmed as CEO and controlling stakeholder. Estimated portfolio valuation, $2.1 billion. Julian's mouth opened. No words came. I adjusted the cuff of my suit and smiled. Now, shall we begin? I passed the audit folders down the table like evidence in a trial. No one reached for them at first. Then Julian snatched his open, flipping through pages too quickly, as if speed could erase the numbers. Harper stared at hers like it was written in another language. Meredith sat frozen, her fingers clenched around her pearls. Julian, I began, voice calm. Would you like to explain the $2.3 million withdrawal from the Blakewell Maintenance Fund that coincided with your Jackson Hole property purchase? He laughed dryly, but his face paled. That was a timing error, our CFO. Our forensic team traced the transaction trail. Your signature appears on every authorization page. I turned to Harper. And you expensed $250,000 in client engagement, most of which was designer handbags, jewelry, and first-class flights with no accompanying meetings or deals. And Harper tried to speak, but her mouth worked without sound. And Meredith, I continued, you signed off on vendor contracts with your son-in-law's construction firm 3 times the market rate for work often left incomplete. Meredith finally whispered, you do this to your own family? No, I said, meeting her eyes. You did this to yourselves. I'm just refusing to cover for it anymore. Dad leaned forward. Vivian, we can fix this, quietly, internally. Highline. That time has passed, I replied. The board deserves transparency, the tenants deserve honesty, and this building deserves better than being treated like a personal ATM. I turned to the independent board members. These reports document years of mismanagement, corruption, and personal enrichment at the expense of legacy and responsibility. I'm here to end it. A long silence fell. The only sound was the shuffle of audit pages and the quiet thud of egos falling flat. And if we refuse? Julian finally asked, trying to muster boldness. I smiled faintly. Then the reports go to the IRS, the State Ethics Board, and the press. Harper gasped. You'd ruin us? I shook my head. I'm giving you the first real chance to save yourselves. And for once, none of them had anything clever to say. I closed the final audit folder with deliberate calm and looked up. I'm not here to destroy anyone, I said. I'm here to rebuild what you forgot. I said. Dad's brow furrowed. You want us to work with you? I want you to remember who built all this in the first place, I said. Great-grandfather Blake laid the first foundation of Blakewell Square with his own hands. He didn't build it to be a trophy. He built it to shelter families, to grow communities. He wrote it in his ledgers, we don't develop for vanity, we develop for value. Meredith swallowed hard, her voice brittle. And you think you're honoring that? I know I am. I gestured to the reports again. The fraud ends here, the nepotism, the silent kickbacks. No more shell companies funneling money to ski homes and handbags. No more using this building as your personal credit line. Harper leaned forward, her voice almost small. And if we agree, then we do this together, I said. We restore Blakewell Square. We rebuild our name on substance, not appearances. You'll answer to the board like anyone else. But you'll have a seat if you earn it. And if we don't? Julian asked, his voice harder now. Then Brightmore moves forward without you. You'll be removed from all roles effective immediately. The public won't hear my silence anymore. They'll hear the truth. A silence fell so thick it felt like gravity. Dad finally spoke, quieter than I'd ever heard him. You could have embarrassed us. You had every reason to. Why didn't you? I met his eyes. Because legacy doesn't need revenge, I said. It needs repair. I gathered my papers slowly. The boardroom's stillness echoed more loudly than their arguments ever had. You have until Monday to decide, I said, turning to leave. Work with me or get out of the way. No one followed me. No one dared to. The media ate it up. Eris unmasked. the quiet mind behind Brightmoor Group restructures her family's fortune. It was everywhere: news tickers, business blogs, even architecture forums praising Brightmoor's preservation first model. Julian resigned from 3 board seats within 2 weeks. His Jackson Hole property quietly went on the market, and his name vanished from Blakewell's financials. Harper's husband's firm dissolved after 2 vendors publicly backed our audit. She moved into a smaller townhouse and, to everyone's surprise, enrolled in a continuing education program for nonprofit housing development. She started volunteering at a transitional shelter on weekends. "I didn't know this world existed," she told me once, rolling paint onto the wall of a women's dormitory. "It feels real." Aunt Meredith canceled her annual winter gala. When asked why, she simply said, "We're recalibrating." But the biggest change came from my father. At first, he stayed silent. Then, slowly, he started showing up unannounced to Blakewell board meetings. He never spoke, just listened. One day, he brought a leather notebook. Not to lead, to learn. "This time," he told me quietly, "I'd like to understand what you built." And I let him. 6 months later, Brightmoor's reforms were fully implemented. Leases were stable. Repair requests were answered promptly. Tenant satisfaction scores reached an all-time high. The ground floor businesses of Blakewell Squareons clinging by thread snow thrived under new fair rate contracts and foot traffic from community events. I still lived in my apartment on Willoughby Lane. Yes, I kept it. It reminded me of where this all began and why it mattered. One evening, just before the holidays, there was a knock at my door. It was Mom. No pearls, no makeup, just jeans and a wool scarf. "I got your invitation," she said, holding it up. "The Willoughby holiday party." "It's not really your scene," I replied gently. "No," she admitted, glancing around the modest hallway. "But I think I'm finally learning that maybe scene isn't the point." And she picked up a framed photo of me at 23, grinning in front of a real estate license-earned banner. "I never asked," she said softly. "Why this path?" I smiled. "Because I wanted to build something real." The night of the Willoughby Lane holiday party was cold, but the courtyard glowed with soft golden light. String lights hung between balconies, children ran between tables, and the scent of spiced cider and baked goods filled the air. I stood by the garden fountain, watching it all. This was legacy. Mom sat on a bench beside Mrs. Alvarez, a tenant who'd lived here since the late 80s. They laughed over gingerbread cookies like old friends. Harper was decorating a sugar cookie station, letting neighborhood kids smudge frosting on her blazer without flinching. Julian helped Mr. Keller, our oldest resident, string lights over the front gate. No camera crews, no speeches, just people showing up. And for once, they weren't performing. Dad joined me near the cocoa table. He was quiet, looking around at the simple joy unfolding in the space we used to call less than. "You know," he said, "your great-grandfather once wrote that buildings should shelter hearts, not just wallets." I nodded. I found his ledgers. He believed in this. Somewhere along the way, we forgot. He turned to Minode as the daughter who disappointed, but as the woman who carried the torch he'd let fall. "You could have ruined us," he said quietly. "Never the point," I replied, watching a little girl twirl under the fairy lights. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to build something that would outlast me. Brightmoor was thriving. We'd expanded to 3 more cities. Partnerships were forming with mission-driven developers. Invitations to speak, consult, and lead poured in daily. But I kept my routine grounded, my calendar humane. Because success isn't what you flash, it's what you preserve, what you share, what you elevate. And sometimes, the greatest triumph isn't proving them wrong. It's offering them a better version of right. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or quietly dismissed by the very people who were supposed to believe in you, you're not alone. Sometimes the loudest success isn't in shouting back. It's in building something so steady, so undeniable, that the world eventually has to pay attention. I didn't set out to humiliate my family. I set out to honor the values they'd forgotten: integrity, responsibility, community. And in doing so, I learned something powerful. You don't need a spotlight to be significant. You don't need their approval to start. You just need purpose and persistence. So if you're working in the shadows, quietly creating something real while others doubt you, keep going. You're not behind. You're just building a foundation that actually holds. Dear viewers, what lessons did you take away from this dramatic tale? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up, share it with friends, and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates. Thanks for watching, and stay blessed.